You know, in a world that feels like it's constantly in flux, most companies are just trying to keep their heads above water. But every now and then, a company doesn't just survive the chaos, they master it. Today, we're going to unpack the absolutely incredible story of PT Hasnor International Shipping, a shipping giant that sailed right through the storm of the post-pandemic economy to achieve something truly historic. Let's get into it.
So that's the big question, right? How in the world does a company look at global chaos and see a golden opportunity? I can tell you it's not about luck. It's about a smart strategy, it's about having foresight, and frankly, a bit of nerve. We're going to break down exactly how they did it, using their own playbook as our guide.
All right, to really get this, we've got to set the scene. The year is 2022. The pandemic has basically thrown a wrench into the entire global economy. It created these massive challenges, but for those who were paying attention, it also created some absolutely huge opportunities. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. You had geopolitical tensions flaring up all over the place. And because of that, commodity prices, especially for stuff like coal, were just all over the map, super volatile. For a shipping company like HIS, this was what their own report called a double-edged sword, a massive, massive opportunity, but also a huge risk. You get it right, you win big. You get it wrong, well, you don't want to think about that.
So, faced with this crazy high-risk, high-reward situation, how did they do? Well, let's just say they didn't just get through the storm. They strapped a rocket to their ship and rode the lightning. The performance they delivered was spectacular. Honestly, the numbers we're about to see are almost hard to wrap your head around.
Let's start with their net revenue. In 2022, it shot up by a whopping 82.34%. Now, that's a fantastic number in any year, but to do that in a period of such global instability, that is just outstanding.
But wait, it gets even better. Take a look at their gross profit. It exploded by an even more staggering 133.79%. This tells you they weren't just bringing in more money, they were doing it way more efficiently. That's the sign of an operation that is firing on all cylinders.
And here it is, the big one, the headline number. Net profit, the bottom line, leaped by an unbelievable 231.6%. Think about that for a second. They more than tripled their profit in a single year. That's the kind of explosive growth that makes history.
And look, don't just take my word for it. This quote says it all. This wasn't just a good year. In their own words from their annual report, it was the single best year in the company's entire history. So the billion-dollar question is, how did they pull this off? Okay, so we've seen the mind-blowing results. Now let's peel back the curtain and get into the how. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't just catching a lucky break. This was the result of a deliberate, aggressive, and just masterfully executed strategy. Here's their 2022 playbook, laid out plain and simple. They saw this tidal wave of demand coming, and they didn't hesitate for a second. They poured over 86 billion rupiah into buying new tugboats and barges. While other companies were probably playing it safe, HIS went on offense. They expanded their fleet to dramatically, and I mean dramatically, boost their cargo capacity. And they were laser-focused on the details. They were all about maximizing the use of every single ship, driving down costs wherever they could, and smartly diversifying their cargo. They didn't just stick to coal, they moved into other hot commodities like wood logs. Their own board of commissioners called these moves appropriate and effective initiatives. It was just a perfect blend of a bold vision and disciplined, smart execution. But you know, every great story has a twist, and this is what really separates a great company from a one-hit wonder. The exact same conditions that fueled their record-breaking 2022, well, they were starting to fade. The leaders at HIS were smart enough to know that the boom wasn't going to last forever. So heading into 2023, the whole picture looked completely different. The forecast was for a global economic slowdown. That windfall profit momentum, as they called it, was coming to an end. The party was over, and it was time for a new game plan. So you can really see the shift here. If 2022 was all about riding that massive wave and cashing in on the windfall, 2023 had to be about something else entirely. It was a shift from aggressive growth to smart optimization to building long-term stability. And let me tell you, making a strategic pivot like that is incredibly difficult to pull off. And here's what that pivot actually looked like. They started focusing on optimizing their vessel rotations to squeeze out every drop of efficiency. They worked to secure longer-term contracts to lock in revenue and create some predictability. And they kept diversifying their cargo into new things like andesite and sand.
It was a more defensive strategy, for sure, but an incredibly smart one for a much tougher market. It's not as flashy as record profits, but this is how you build a business that lasts. You know, a company's ability to pivot like that, to turn on a dime so effectively, that doesn't just happen by magic. It's not improvised. It has to be built on a really solid foundation and a clear long-term vision that guides you through the good times and, more importantly, the bad. So let's just trace their journey, because it's pretty wild. They were founded back in 2009. They went public on the stock exchange in 2021, hit that unbelievable historic peak in 2022, and then, without missing a beat, executed this masterful pivot in 2023. That's a story of rapid, intelligent evolution.
So, what's the secret sauce holding all this together? Well, it's a deep commitment to something called good corporate governance. Now, what does that actually mean in plain English? Think of it as the company's North Star, its moral compass. It's a promise to operate with sustainability, accountability, responsibility, independence, and fairness. These aren't just corporate buzzwords. This is the stable bedrock that allows leadership to make those bold strategic moves with confidence.
And this isn't just talk. You can actually see it in the data. Their board of commissioners and their audit committee met consistently and frequently all the way through the boom year of 2022 and the tough pivot year of 2023. That shows active, hands-on oversight. It means the strategy is always being tested and the execution is always on point. Which brings us to a final thought. The story of P.T. Hosner International Shipping, from navigating a chaotic wave to record-shattering profits and then skillfully pivoting to a new reality, it offers a really powerful lesson for all of us. In a world that's defined by constant, unpredictable change, maybe the ability to adapt isn't just an asset, maybe it's the only asset that truly matters.